Well, for 20 years, our next speaker, he's been developing billion-dollar direct-to-consumer brands all over the globe. They've included ING Direct and Kobo. Up next is Ben Castro. He's the VP of Marketing at the D2C hearing aid brand EarGo. And he's with us. He's going to share how he's been using his D2C know-how to really apply a broader strategy to TV. So welcome, Ben.
Hi,
How are
thanks
you?
for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Where are you coming to us from?
Oh, I'm from San Jose, California. I just realized I still have my EarGo background now, so let me take that off. There you go.
Oh, we like the EarGo orange.
All right, I can put it back on if you want.
Whatever you want. So you're West Coast too, so you're up early as well.
Yeah.
You didn't have to come on at I'm a night girl, so but
I
anyway,
hear you.
enough of that. Let me leave it for you and let everyone know what's going on.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. I prepared a little presentation. Let me just quickly share this. Oops, I shared it wrong. Let me share it correctly. There we go. All right. I gotta go to presentation mode. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Looks
I'm
good.
I'm gonna assume that's a yes. Okay. So, as Lisa mentioned, I've been doing this for actually almost 25 years now. Started in the 90s. Actually started in digital. um, Working at a boutique digital agency because back then the big agencies weren't doing digital. It was all these boutique agencies. Us old timers will remember, um, and uh, and then of course the big agencies started doing digital. From that I quickly got into doing all media, especially TV, and I've been doing TV for over 20 years. Working on amazing D2C brands, and just to name a few, ING Direct, that started in Canada. I'm Canadian, by the way. Uh, Came here 6 years ago for EarGo, but most of my work has been in Canada and working on some major brands coming out of Canada, including ING Direct, which became the biggest direct bank in the world. Back in an era we started when no one was doing online banking and everyone ridiculed us for banking online. And today, who the hell banks in a branch? I don't know. But we certainly started that, and then, of course, 10 years ago with the financial crisis, the ING Direct unfortunately did not fare well in that. But up to that point, they were doing well. Kobo is another example of a great D2C. They're second largest e-reading company in the world behind Kindle. We grew everywhere else but the US. We decided to leave that to Kindle. So if you go elsewhere in the world, you'll see Kobo everywhere. Bell is one of the big telcos in Canada. And then, of course, EarGo. And who is EarGo? Well, EarGo is we make hearing aids. We have hearing loss solutions for those that need it. And I just need to give you a little bit of a background on that, so that you can understand what I'm about to talk about. The first thing I want to tell you is that hearing loss, it affects more people than you think. In fact, it could affect quite a few people in the room that you're in right now. There are 43 million Americans suffering with hearing loss today, and that number is growing by 18,000 a day. And the WHO estimates that today in the world there are 500 million people with hearing loss, but that number is going to grow to 2.5 billion people by the year 2050. That's not very far off. That's only 29 years away, and it's going to be almost half the people in the world with hearing loss. Why? Why is this growing so quickly? Well, because of this. We are all listening to things using devices at very unsafe levels, and we're destroying our hearing. We live in a very toxic audio world, and our ears have not evolved to this. They're still very sensitive, and as a result, we are suffering from hearing loss. But EarGo's solution is really about overcoming a couple of the problems that people have associated with hearing loss. The first one is that people have denial and stigma associated with hearing loss. And it's true. If there's two things in this world that you're going to avoid at all costs, right? It's the walker, right? And the hearing aid, right? Those are the things that basically telegraph to everybody, you're over the hill, you're done. And so people are going to avoid them. And as a result, nobody wants this ugly banana behind your ear. And so as a result, people will wait 6, 7, 8, 10 years before they actually get a hearing aid, even though they know they have hearing loss. So we come in, we provide a beautiful form factor. It's invisible, it fits in your ear. And the only thing we have to overcome is how do we get people to adopt this? We get over the stigma. And people have called us the Warby Parker of hearing aids, as you see there, but because of the beautiful design factor and the D2C aspect of it. But we still have to overcome that psychological barrier. And how do we do that? Well, sorry, I'll just get to the next slide. We do that by first finding our target, right? And we have 2 specific targets that we go after. The first one is what we call affluent empty nesters. These people, they are obviously boomers, older boomers. They have above average income, but as you can see from the media profile on the bottom left, they are traditional medialists. They watch a lot of TV. They still read the newspaper, or they'll read it online, listen to the radio, internet, not so much. Especially social, they'll go in, they're all on Facebook, but that's pretty much it. They're not on all the other platforms. They go in, they do their thing, and they get out. They're slowly getting into digital, but not as fast as other groups. But they have a lot of money, and they are in the prime part of their lives where they're starting to suffer hearing loss. And by the way, hearing loss is natural. It's a natural progression of age, as well as this dangerous world that we live in. The other one is conservative classics. And these, again, are people that are older, less income, but again, watch a lot of television, read a lot of newspaper, and less so on the internet. So you can see that our targets really focus on TV. And so, for a brand like ours, we obviously need to be on the media that our target watches, and that is television. And so when we first started out advertising about 6 years ago, we realized, okay, so we have to do that. We have to be on TV, but how are we going to do that? Because TV can be expensive. And so while we were figuring that out, we first started with digital, with SEM and whatnot. You get the low hanging fruit and you can start to build your business that way, but that only goes so far. And so to really expand our business, we had to get into the mass reach media. But that can be really, really expensive for a small little D2C at the time that we were. So how do we approach that? Well, the first thing we realized, is that we need a piece of creative. And the creative that we have has to solve a psychological problem that I mentioned. And that is that, people, our purchase funnel is more complex than the average purchase funnel, because we are selling a product that people are first in denial of even having an issue with. So if I try to sell you tires, right, and you don't even own a car, right, you're not going to buy the tires. Well, it's the same thing here. If you're in denial that you have hearing loss, I don't have hearing loss, I'm fine, I can get by, I can just, I find ways to cope, I'll lean in, I'll learn to read lips, I'll ask people to repeat themselves. And those are the common coping mechanisms that all deniers exhibit. And so what they do is by creating these different actions, they've created this kind of wall or barrier to actual adoption. And what ends up happening, the typical way, is that wall breaks down through some kind of intervention from a family or friend, in which case you are completely demotivated, disempowered, and you're dragged to a clinic by your family, and then you're forcefully sold hearing aids, and that's a very disempowering experience. So we're trying to change that by creating a powering experience. So how do we overcome that denial and acceptance? Well, we use humor. Humor is a great tool to break down certain psychological barriers like that. It disarms people, and once they're disarmed, opens them up to receive the information. And just to give you an example of that, I've put in 2 ads here to show you that our typical type of humor that we do.
Thanks for having us this weekend, Mrs. Garcia.
Yeah, thanks, Mom.
Of course, and thank you guys for these gorgeous flowers. So thoughtful.
condoms, Charlie. She wants to know if you brought any condoms.
Yeah, I brought some.
EarGo, a virtually invisible hearing loss solution with high-quality sound and lifetime support.
So that's one of them. Now I think I have to just bear with me for 1 second. Oops, that didn't work. So as you can see with that ad, we obviously used the condom reference, but in particular taking a situation where, that people could see themselves in, and again, placing, our target, our hero, as the hero in that ad, and showing him as a smart individual and how EarGo helped him to overcome his situation. And that's our brand ad. So that's our brand ad, and we also do DRTV ads, and the DRTV get much more product specific, but again, focus on the later side of life. And what we're doing there is again trying to break down those barriers, but this time give you more information about the ad itself. And here's a typical DRTV ad that we run.
And welcome back to Guess What It Is. Now, Sally, guess what this futuristic gadget is, and you'll win a very special prize.
Oh, I need a hint.
Well, they're sleek, rechargeable, incredibly comfortable, and virtually invisible in your ear, and they sound amazing.
Hearing aids.
You are correct.
These top-of-the-line hearing aids from EarGo are straight out of the future. They're rechargeable and virtually invisible in your ears.
Convenient, right?
Do I win them?
Johnny, tell her what you won.
It's a decorative badger.
But I want the earbuds.
You can't have them. These EarGos are mine, and we'll be back right after this.
EarGo, your life to the fullest.
And so, that was more of an homage to the old game show of the 70s that a lot of our target will fondly remember. And so that was the purpose of that ad. So the point is we're going to disarm people with humor. And from that, we started to build our media plan with television. And so when we started with TV, we started really, really small. As we were a small, scrappy D2C about 6 years ago, and so we didn't have a lot of money. We focused on low hanging fruit, like I said, on the SEM side. But we said, let's get some money together, and that's where our target is. Let's start going on to TV. And so obviously, if you don't have a lot of money on TV, you got to go to the smaller stations. You got to go where the spots are like a few $100s a spot. But our target does watch a lot of these stations, and so we worked with our agency. We got together a little budget, about $40,000-$50,000, and we started advertising on DRTV. And our audience, we started actually on the Game Show Network and on Discovery and History Channel, a lot of places that smaller audiences, niche audiences, but our target definitely was absolutely there. And then what we were trying to do is really prove that the medium worked, and so long as the cost pers were coming within our cost envelope, we were very happy to start spending more and more and more. And that's exactly what happened. We started spending, and in the beginning, it didn't come in our cost envelope. We had to learn what was working, what wasn't working, what day parts were working, what ads were working the best, what call to actions in the ads were working the best. And in our ads, we had a couple of call to actions. We had a phone number, an 800 number that people could call. Each ad had its own 800, so we could track it, and then a URL. And the URL, we were using the tracking methodology of our agency to track the URL. And they had basically what they were doing was they were looking at call spikes and direct calls to our 1-800 number, as well as web traffic. And the web traffic and call spikes to our general number were basically within a 5-minute window after the ad aired. If there was a spike out of the norm within that 5-minute window, then we attributed it to that ad that aired on TV. And that worked in the beginning, especially, when you don't run a lot of TV ads, you can definitely see these spikes. But as you start to run a lot of TV ads and they start to overlap, those spike windows start to blur, right? And they don't really tell the whole tale of the tape, unfortunately. And so you risk, what happens is that you risk optimizing media incorrectly. You risk cutting things that actually could be working. And we started to know this as we started to not only expand from DRTV stations into what we call reach stations, the big network stations. We started to see that human behavior around our ads were very different than what that window was showing us. For instance, when we would run on, say, Jeopardy, for instance, we would run the ad at night, and we would see a call spike and a web spike as soon as the ad aired, and it ran for about a window of I'd say 30 minutes. After that, then the spike would start to meter down. But more so, we would see that the call spike continue the next day. The next day, as business opened, we would see calls suddenly just jump up. And it's the human behavior there is that people who want to see their program, they believe you're not open, so they'll call the next morning. And as a result, we realized, well, the measurement methodology we had isn't going to track that effectively. So what did we do? We started to look at MTA and MMM, and from that, using basically MMM is basic regression technology, and so by using those regressions, we're able to track back effectively to a spot that aired or to a program that airs and how much impact it has on the certain level of responses that are important for us, which right now is phone and online orders in particular. And another thing I should mention is that for us, we have a product that people don't buy right away, so it complicates even further our tracking. People will take their time to buy a set of hearing aids. Why? Because it's expensive, right? I mean, the average cost of a pair of hearing aids is $4,600. EarGo start at $1,450, but that's still a huge price tag out there. So when something gets to that value, people do their research, right? And they'll go on our website, they'll go on review sites, et cetera, and look at, ask friends, ask professionals. And so on average, people will take 2 to 3 weeks to buy an EarGo. I mean, we get people that buy them right away as well. That's for sure that happens as well. But on average, it takes 2 to 3 weeks. People do their research and they come back. So, we have to also take a look at that and overlay that in our MMM. So we look at, when the initial call or when the initial web visit happened, and then we look at eventual conversion so that we optimize on the conversion aspect of it. So it's a very complex process of how we measure and optimize our TV. But since we started doing that, we have found more efficiencies on television. And as a result, we started spending more and more. And, we would test different programs, and some of them would work and some of them would not. And as we got to Reach TV, with DRTV, you're spending a few $100s, maybe a couple $1,000s on a spot. You get to the big network stations, you're suddenly spending $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a spot. The learning becomes harder to stomach, obviously, but you need to do it because you will find some of those programs that really work, and you're going to find some duds as well. The only way you're going to know is really by trying. I mean, there have been programs that we have seen. This is the exact odd. This is who our audience is. They are there for sure. Didn't work. And we have done others where we're like, not so sure, but let's give it a shot, and it worked. So the only rule there that I can see is you just got to try it. You just got to test. Another rule that we live by is we optimize by the numbers, period. Right? You don't fall in love with the program. Don't fall in love with the station. Let the numbers dictate how to optimize. And it's kind of like direct mail or digital in that aspect. You may think this program has got to work. This program has got to work. Like there was a big daytime game show that we thought for sure this has to work. This has to work. This is where our audience is. It never worked. We ran on there a few times. It never worked. And we had to let the numbers tell us, okay, stop. Otherwise, we're just throwing good money after bad. Of course, with DRTV and any TV, you got to optimize by the day parts, the programs, the creative, etc. Especially if we have an offer out in the field, we'll see a general lift in response, and you have to mitigate for that. And those are just standard hygienic practices of how to optimize TV. I already mentioned about testing the channels, and then optimize the mix in terms of testing, and in terms of what the DRTV and brand TV mix that has worked. In the different companies that I've been in, that mix varies. In general, from a testing mix, I try to generally use 80% of my media on stuff that's tried and true. Keep the lights on type of media, and I keep 20% for testing new channels, testing new things. Even OTT and CTV, etc. But on the DRTV brand TV mix, like I said, it really has varied over my career with how far I weigh to one versus the other. With us currently at EarGo, I'm finding I need to weigh a little bit heavier on DRTV than brand, but it also depends. If I'm coming out with a new campaign, I will go heavier on the brand to build that awareness up, because the reach TV, or brand TV as I call it, that generates a lot more awareness for us than the DR. Brand TV generates more calls and web visits than DR, but DR does it much more efficiently. And DR doesn't do much for the web visits. It does more for the calls. But certainly to build awareness, you need to get that reach out there. And then the DR just kind of cultivates and reaps the benefits of what the brand had done. So it depends on the type of year, but in general, a little bit heavier on the brand than on the DR. Which one should you start with? I would always suggest starting with DR. It's more economical, easy to scale. You get the remnant inventory. It's a great way to test TV without spending a lot of money. The issue is that you're not going to generate a lot of overall brand awareness. The audiences are a lot smaller than Reach TV, and it is more phone driven in terms of response. But sooner or later, as your TV budgets grow, you can make that jump to Reach TV, and that's where you can get laser focus on the audience. You got to test, and I know it's hard to stomach of some of these shows, especially if you're coming from DRTV world. They're a lot more in terms of cost, but then again, they're a lot more in terms of reach. So when you look at the CPMs, they're very comparable. It's just that these are massive stations, and as a result, you're getting a lot more reach, and the impact on the business is greater as a result. You need to have, for D2C anyway, really good solid CTAs for all the channels. And then what I like to say is give it time. Don't freak out. Just because a program aired and it didn't work, don't cut it right away. You have to let it run. Sometimes there needs to be some frequency. On average, I think the golden rule is 7. You give something seven touches before you cut it. So give it a frequency of 7. I like to look at things at a 3-week window. So if a station or program didn't work in the first week, that's fine. Let's go to the second week. But after 3 weeks, if the average isn't there, if it hasn't started to improve, then we'll cut it. And so I think that's been a good rule of thumb for us. And as you scale the reach, you're going to drive a lot of awareness, and that's what we've seen. We were at a certain level of awareness. As we started to really increase our reach TV, our awareness has started to really skyrocket, and that will have its benefits down the road of driving the overall CPA of the business. Even though in the short term with reach, when you first get into it, your CPAs will rise because of the cost and because of all the testing you're doing. But as you start to optimize, they will come down. All right, so what do we do in terms of response? Well, we look at everything. We look at site visits, calls, search spikes, cost per call, cost per response, cost per acquisition. But I think, what I was talking about earlier in terms of, search spikes, you can see there, I've highlighted in the red circle. This is our website, and you can see when I ran a primetime spot, we got a little bit of a search spike at during the evening, but then the next morning came the big search spike. And we see the same kind of behavior with calls. And the behavior basically, as I mentioned, people are going to finish their program. They probably don't think you're open. This is, referring to our demo. And they're like, I'll call them the next morning. And that's exactly what happens. And we see it time and time and time again. So, for us, it's, that last bullet point is probably the most important, which is, evaluate conversion on the media journey. Don't just, look at these little spikes and these little windows. You got to look at the whole media journey, and then not just digital, but not just TV, but what TV can actually do from an ancillary perspective. We we noticed that TV has a huge impact on our SEM. It has a huge impact on conversion from our website and so on, and even on our digital. And so as a result, we've started to look at, when TV is on, what does that do for the overall response of everything? And it brings everything down. All the CPAs come down and the response goes, it's like it floats all ships even higher. And so we started to create metrics. We started to analyze our media mix and realize, okay, which ones in particular is TV influencing? It doesn't influence direct mail as much, doesn't influence a couple of other ones as much, but certainly on SEM, Google, some of the native ads that we have, we started to notice that there was influence in these. So we created a metric, a customized metric that really looks at an all-in CPA of TV and everything else that it influences. So it doesn't take all our media into account, but we call it a TV-related metric, TV-related CPA. And we look at that religiously every day, and we optimize by that. And we have found that it is bringing us much more efficiency to the business. And it allows us to understand even further how people are using different media to respond. And to that end, how do we figure out which other media TV is influencing? Well, MTA, right? We use a company called Rockerbox. They help us to figure this out, and we're able to analyze and understand. People have different journey paths, but there are some common ones. People will see a TV ad, especially for a brand that's not really well known as EarGo, and they'll go, "Oh wow, that EarGo." And they didn't, they don't remember the phone number or whatnot. So what do? They Google it, right? And so we see that all the time. And so to look at TV without looking at the other media along the journey that it influences is a misnomer, and you could be doing some severe disjustice to your media mix by not looking at those in totality. All right, some final thoughts from me. Look, if you're thinking about TV, if you're not in yet, just do it. Dive in. You don't have to have huge budgets. Yeah, huge budgets make it even easier, and you can grow the testing curve faster, but just start, because TV is definitely it's still one of the biggest media, depending on your demo, but all demos that I can see still watch TV, and so to some degree. So it's a great media. It's still a very highly fragmented universe. There's lots of different channels, and especially when you start looking at OTT and whatnot, it kind of makes it even more interesting. But just start and find your target, find your audience, and then test and learn. And I think you'll find very quickly that you'll have efficiencies. Creative is obviously very, very important. So make sure that your creative achieves its objectives. It has strong CTAs. And if you have any psychological barriers like we have, then your creative becomes even more important, because it has to work harder than the average typical creative out there. And my last thought is, give it time. Don't just start TV and this didn't work for a couple weeks. You have to really commit to it, and then after that, I think you'll see through optimization that it will start to pay dividends. Thoughts, questions?
Thank you. Ben, thank you. This is Steve from Montauk. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it. We love getting the D2C perspective on this. Let's see if we have a few quick questions from the audience here. Ben, I wanted to know about context, since you used the Jeopardy example, and you saw certain behavior come off of that. And you also mentioned that you test a lot of individual shows. So what impact, if any, does content and context have on user response as you're playing across not only the channels, but even testing individual programming?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, one of the reasons why we did that game show spot that you saw was because we saw that our target was watching a lot of game shows. They like it. And so, we thought, well, let's create our own version of a game show. And I think, by the way, we did too good a version of that creative, because CBS, for instance, won't run this on Price is Right because they say it looks too much like a game show. So, sometimes a little too much context is not good for you. But that is a good point. Yes, we do use we look at the kind of shows that they're watching, and when we creatively try to figure out what we're going to do, we're like, well, they really appreciate this, they like this, let's try to give them more of what they like. Again, to break down that psychological barrier, trying to create a link, a relationship with the viewer, we find really works well for us. So yes, we absolutely look at the programs, what they're watching, what's responding, and then try to tailor the creative to that content.
Any surprises in that mix? Are there any shows that you didn't see coming that actually proved to be especially effective, or particular channels?
The short answer is yes.
I'm sorry. Okay.
The short answer is yes. We're for instance, we're on Fox News, which I always thought, oh, maybe our demo is not necessarily, but no, they do watch it. And for us, it's it's take the whole political aspect of it. Where is our target, and where do they go? And so definitely, we have to go there. And I never thought they would necessarily be on certain shows on Fox News but they are. Another one that really caught us by surprise was Cartoon Network.
Cartoon Network. Wow.
Yeah. So who would have thought, right? And maybe it's because they show some of the old cartoons. I don't know. Maybe people like it, but and because it's so affordable, we decided to stay on there, and it's working.
Ben Castro, that's exactly what I was digging for, by the way, that kind of surprise that comes up when you start doing that sort of show by show testing. It's stuff that you didn't see coming, contexts that work that we didn't expect. Ben Castro, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.